Alright guys, Delzinski here, and I've just got done watching TNA's biggest pay-per-view of the year, Bound for Glory 2014 from Tokyo, Japan. Now going into this pay-per-view, many people had said it wasn't worth watching and that TNA had dropped the ball once again, but I wanted to get my own view on it, so I did indeed watch the pay-per-view, and today I'm going to give you my review. Now, many people were very disappointed going into Bound for Glory because it was being held outside of the US in Tokyo, Japan, but TNA hadn't even secured their World Heavyweight Champion Bobby Lashley to be on the card. Yes, I completely agree that was massively disappointing that they didn't get the World Champion having to defend his title at Bound for Glory. That is kind of ludicrous. But I'm willing to move past that, and I was willing to move past that when I watched this pay-per-view. So let's put that aside for now, and let's look at Bound for Glory and what actually went down and whether it was good or whether it was bad. Now, as I said, it's the first time ever Bound for Glory was held outside of the US, and the reason being was it was an inter-promotion. It was Wrestle 1 versus TNA, almost as such, and many of the matches that were on the card were Wrestle 1 guys versus TNA guys. So this kind of made it quite interesting, and it was a bit like before where TNA had a deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling and they did a similar kind of thing, but they never did it at such a big level as having one of their major pay-per-views like Bound for Glory showcase something like this. So the actual pay-per-view itself, the matches, I'm going to look at this in two ways. There's the wrestling side and then there's the promotional side, and there's, you know, the actual way that the event looked and felt, and I think that's where the issues come in. So from a wrestling side, there were some good matches. In fact, there were some very good matches. The card started off very well with Tanaka versus Manic. This was a really good match to kickstart the pay-per-view. I thoroughly enjoyed this match, and I felt if all the matches are like this throughout the evening, this was going to be a good pay-per-view. And to be honest with you, I'm going to say it now, I thought all the matches were fairly good. Some were more outstanding than others, and Manic versus Tanaka was one of the best matches, I would say, on this card. I enjoyed it. It was a good start, and it led into this was really more of just a wrestling event. Nothing more, nothing less. So, you know, there was no fanciness about it. It was just, you know, match after match after match with a couple of odd promos here or there. And then, obviously, Team 3D's induction into the Hall of Fame. So, to follow this, we had more of a comedic match. And this was the only comedy side of the pay-per-view, which for me is kind of a good thing because I think it's done to death sometimes, the comedy side. But we had Ethan Carter, EC3, going up against Ryota Hama. I think that's how you say his name, or Hammer. And this guy basically is like a Japanese version of Rikishi. He's pretty big, as you can imagine, and the way they did this, I mean, I thought they did it quite well. I'm going to be brutally honest. It was okay. Ethan Carter still kept his credibility, albeit that he did get a stink face. Yes, I said he looked like Rikishi, and he still has the moves like Rikishi. But the way they did it was Ethan Carter still came out on top. He still is undefeated, and they can build from this with EC3. I think he's the strongest thing going in TNA at the moment. Ethan Carter is the future of TNA, and they're doing a very good job at promoting this. I thought this match was good, but maybe one of the issues here was that this card in general doesn't have a lot of substance. There's no storyline or build to a lot of these matches. They were just all lumped together as a Wrestle 1 versus TNA. So maybe we can forgive it because that was the reason they did this. And what I kind of like to do during this pay-per-view was keep the score. So I thought this was the interesting way to make this event have a lot of sense to it. Was the first match, Tanaka beat Manic, so that was 1-0 Tanaka. The next match, EC3 beat Ryota Hama, so it was 1-1. And that was the way that I looked at the pay-per-view overall, so that was my impression, and that was the way I wanted to play it out. Throughout the evening, as I say, the matches were pretty decent. MVP versus Sakamoto. Again, a pretty decent match, and MVP completely over with the Japanese crowd. And it was very nice to see some backstage segments in regards to the superstars talking about their time in Japan, and some of them even leaving sports entertainment companies to go and wrestle in Japan previously and build and hone their skills, and now they have returned as part of Bound for Glory. The best match on the card was easily Samoa Joe, Low-Ki and Kaz Hayashi. The chemistry was great, and this was like a traditional X Division match. It was for the X Division Championship. Joe had a bad shoulder, but this didn't seem to play any impact in the match at all. Everyone was on point, and it really was great. It's great to see Low-Ki back. I've got to admit, TNA have done very well in securing Low-Ki. The double foot stomp is exquisite, and it was a good match, and it was the best one on the card. Throughout the night, we had a few matches which were not inter-promotional, and it was just Wrestle 1 guys versus Wrestle 1 guys, and it was TNA guys versus TNA guys. They were absolutely fine. Again, decent wrestling, but not a lot else to say about them. The Team 3D match, I'll cover their Hall of Fame a little bit later, but the Team 3D match against Abyss and Tommy Dreamer, my criticism here is, why was Abyss involved? I didn't really get this. This felt like a moment to kind of have some nostalgia with the ECW side, so obviously Tommy Dreamer makes sense to have, but Abyss, not quite so much. I would have rather than replaced Abyss with Rhino, and then it has that whole ECW feel, because if you're going to do it, you might as well have them all in, and the crowd were chanting ECW, so the Japanese crowd, the Tokyo crowd were chanting ECW. It didn't make sense for Abyss to be in there. The only reason why I can see that he was because he's got that sort of skill with the Monster's Ball, and he did whip out the thumbtacks. What was interesting about the matches, again going throughout the evening, was they were quite different and quite versatile, which I liked. You had the Manic match where it was high flying. You had the X Division match, which was fast paced. You had the MVP match, which was a little bit more technical. You had the Team 3D Abyss Tommy Dreamer match, which again, this time taking a different look, was more extreme. We had thumbtacks, we had tables, we had chairs. So throughout the course of the evening, we got a lot of style of matches, so I thought this was very, very good from TNA. The weakest match on the card was Havoc versus Velvet Sky, purely because, for me, I'm not a Havoc fan. I don't think she really brings a lot to the table. It's more to do with the gimmick. I mean, I think they're trying to push the gimmick, but they haven't really analysed that she's not exactly a great wrestler. She seems to look awkward in many positions, and she doesn't seem to sell moves very well. That's my criticism of Havoc, and I think that maybe pushing her so much so soon is not really doing her any favours. She looks a little bit naive, and she doesn't look right as champion at the moment. I'd a lot rather see a Taryn Terrell, Gail Kim feud than her just tearing apart the Knockouts division. And she beat Velvet Sky with a bear hug. Ugh. I mean, I wouldn't mind hugging Velvet Sky, but I wouldn't want to beat her with a bear hug. It was kind of rubbish. So, yeah, weakest match on the card, definitely. Now, into the main event. And what you'll see here, and as I go through this review, is what I'm trying to get across here is the wrestling was pretty good. Many people have gone way over the top and tried to destroy the whole of the pay-per-view. I don't think it was that bad at all. I think the wrestling was very good. And the main event is the only match, really, that has any storyline to it. And you know, like I say, if you review this pay-per-view as a Wrestle 1 versus TNA, then it's quite good. But unfortunately, it is also Bound for Glory, so you should expect more than that. But the Great Muta Tajiri versus James Storm and the Great Sanada was the main event of the evening. No title match, no World Championship there. So this was the big one, and a very, very strange start to the match. It was very slow paced. I wasn't sure whether this was going to get over as they had hoped, but it did come together in the end. There was green mist, there was red mist, there was a combination of the green and red mist, there was blue mist, there was super kicks. Tajiri nearly knocks the Great Sonata's head off with his super kick, but the finish of this match was very good, and it was a good way to end Bound for Glory. As I say, overall, as a wrestling pay-per-view, it was pretty solid. I enjoyed it. Now, as I say, that's the wrestling part done. The promotional side, the look, the feel of the event was very subpar. It was not good at all. I mean, this is Bound for Glory, so surely it should be promoted as your biggest pay-per-view of the year. I look at the ring, I see a Wrestle 1 logo in the middle of the ring, not Bound for Glory. I look at the ring is a 4-sided ring. It's meant to be 6 sides these days. TNA should have been calling the shots with the look and the feel of this pay-per-view. I looked around, I couldn't really see any signs of Bound for Glory. It was all either Wrestle 1 related or just small Impact logos and TNA logos. Nothing which would make you think, wow, this is like, you know, TNA's WrestleMania in terms of Bound for Glory. It just did not feel like that, and that's very disappointing. On top of this as well, the commentary team didn't even travel over to Tokyo. So, and I have a huge issue with the commentary team. They didn't go out there, so when they recorded it, they kind of were like, 1 minute they were saying they were there, trying to imply they were there, and then the next minute they were backtracking, saying that they were, you know, oh, look at the wrestlers over there whilst we're over here. And it felt awkward, it felt wrong, and it didn't feel right. But the biggest criticism of the commentary team was the amount of other promotional name dropping. This was unbelievable. In fact, it was a disgrace. Mike Tenay, I don't think quite understands it. You don't name drop rival companies constantly. I mean, all you're doing is giving them more exposure. If I hear what's going on or what used to go on in New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe I'll just stop watching TNA for now and go and watch New Japan, because you told us so much about New Japan Pro Wrestling's history here. I felt like I was watching a New Japan pay-per-view. Ridiculous. He even name-dropped WWE at one point and talked about Lord Tensai. Is this relevant at TNA's biggest pay-per-view of the year? When would you ever hear the WWE mention TNA at WrestleMania? It just doesn't happen. It's bad for business. And it feels like Mike Tenay has the idea that he, you know, openly promotes what's bad for business, because he just went on and on and on. It's all good and well trying to talk about the background of wrestlers, the background of superstars and where they came from, but you can say they was a multi-time champion in another organization. You don't have to name drop. Ultimately, this devalues the product. And that's what it did for TNA at Bound for Glory. That's what it did for Wrestle 1. The amount of times Mike Tenay talked about New Japan, it felt like he was putting over New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it didn't even feel like Wrestle 1 were even included. And if I was a Wrestle 1 fan, or if I was the great Muta who looks after and promotes that company, I would wonder why you would name drop a rival so much. Absolutely stupid. So this was a big gripe for me, and it felt like the more that Mike Tenay did this, the more it devalued this pay-per-view. In addition to this as well, one of the biggest issues was actually the Hall of Fame induction. Now, the Hall of Fame induction, the TNA Hall of Fame always seems a little bit half-assed, and it definitely felt more half-assed considering that half the roster weren't there to induct Bully Ray and Devon. Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, Bobby Lashley, many more were not in attendance. Only a few handful of the TNA superstars and the TNA locker room were there. So to actually have the induction done, we saw a snippet of it. We didn't see an awful lot. We saw them having a meal and then Bully Ray and Devon doing their acceptance speech, but kind of just felt a little bit, again, amateurish from TNA. And I mean, maybe that led to what Bully Ray dropped as a bombshell during the end of Bound for Glory, but this really takes the biscuit. This isn't TNA's fault, but TNA should give Bully Ray a real slap on the wrist, or really just think, why did we push this guy to the moon and back? Because if you don't know already, Bully Ray at the end of Bound for Glory comes out, I believe he's got a Bullet Club t-shirt, again, New Japan Pro Wrestling reference here, and he then cuts a promo saying that he's going to put each and every single member of the Bullet Club through a table, and that him and Bully Ray are going, him and Devon are going for those New Japan tag team belts. Now, when TNA don't have a deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling, TNA have a deal with Wrestle One. But this was cut from the show. This was done during the live show, but it was cut from TV. How disrespectful is this from a superstar to do this to your company that have just inducted you into the Hall of Fame, recognized how good you are, given you the respect you deserve, and you give them this respect back? This is terrible. This is the utmost disrespectful thing I think I've ever seen in terms of coming out and trying to put over yourself, to elevate yourself, to move to another level. And that is what Bully Ray ultimately was doing. He was putting himself over so he can then use TNA as a stepping stone and Wrestle One as a stepping stone to then jump into New Japan Pro Wrestling and jump into GFW. And as I say that, I think it's even more terrible because GFW is a huge rival to TNA. GFW, Global Force Wrestling, run by Jeff Jarrett, could indeed be the final nail in TNA's coffin if they do get big enough. And Bully Ray is just going to go and jump ship and do that and leave TNA to get buried. When I heard this had happened, because obviously it got cut from the main show, I just thought, what is going on? And, something like this, if I ran TNA and a wrestler came out, cut this unscheduled promo talking about a rival organization, and I've just inducted them into my Hall of Fame, I would be scratching them off that list immediately, and I'd be revoking that induction. I mean, it's just wrong. It just shouldn't happen. And Bully Ray went there and he did it. This did no favours for TNA. This does no favours for the Great Muta's Wrestle One promotion. I wonder what he thinks about that. I mean, again, Wrestle One's trying to climb the ladder. New Japan Pro Wrestling is the biggest in Japan. And, when somebody's cutting promos about a rival organisation as opposed to putting over your own, I mean, what must he be thinking? It was just terrible, and it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And as I say, people were saying that this was not a good pay-per-view. I think you have to split it out. You have to split it out in terms of wrestling, and then you have to look at the promotional side of it as well. The wrestling side was very good. There were some good matches in there. It was solid. It wasn't anything amazing, but it was good. The promotional side was below par. It didn't look or feel like a pay-per-view. It felt very amateurish. It definitely didn't feel like TNA's WrestleMania in terms of Bound for Glory, that's for sure. That's what's wrong with the product at the moment, and that is the constructive side, what I'm looking at. I'm not looking to just say it sucked, because I don't think it did. I think we got some very good matches in there. But overall, to then end the pay-per-view with a guy going into the Hall of Fame and then turns around and totally disrespects the company in general, well, that's something that needs to be addressed. TNA need to get their shit together and start working on the guys that really want to be in TNA, and not guys like Bully Ray who want to then go and slap them in the face and move on and go elsewhere. Just is not good at all. So guys, that's my review. From a wrestling aspect, very good. Promotional, not so good. But at the end of the day, Team 3D may be letting the product down hugely in terms of putting over other rival companies. The commentary team needs to be reviewed. Mike Tenay's contract is up very soon. And I would suggest that TNA review his commentary and listen to what he says, because the amount of times you name drop rivals, it is just not doing anything good at all for you. And he seems to do it more than anyone else, and I do not understand a reason for it. So guys, let me know what you think of Bound for Glory 2014. I want to get your views on it. Split it out like I did, wrestling versus promotion. And also give me your views on that bully race segment that was not shown on TV. It's everywhere right now on the internet. You can go and check it out. All that's left to be said from me is please rate, comment and subscribe. And as always, this is Delzinski signing out.